tonight. The plot thickens in Ottawa.
We did hear from the former Attorney General yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and now we want to hear from the Prime Minister, the man who stands accused of major political interference in a criminal case.
As Andrew Scheer calls for a criminal investigation of Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister's former top aide is ready to speak his truth.
Not a lot of mums out there, such as myself, knew that rice had arsenic.
Investigating a common ingredient in baby food. What Canadian families need to know about rice.
It's a lot of just nastiness, name-calling.
And why Meghan Markle has become the target of online hate, how some are trying to shield her. This is The National. One day after Jody Wilson-Raybould gave her blistering account of backroom Liberal politics, the Trudeau government's biggest scandal to date has taken new twists. Remember, the former Attorney General alleged that the Prime Minister and key figures around him put inappropriate pressure on her, even used veiled threats to defer the criminal prosecution of the Quebec-based engineering giant SNC-Lavalin. The opposition says that pressure might itself constitute a crime. We'll have more on that in a moment. But first, David Cochrane starts our coverage with the government's rebuttal.
The Prime Minister started the day wanting to talk about outer space, but the questions were all about events in his political orbit.
There are disagreements in perspective on this, but I can reassure Canadians that we were doing our job.
That's the Liberal line. This is all a difference of opinion. So another key player will try to drive that home. Gerry Butts, the Prime Minister's former top advisor who resigned last week, has now asked to testify at the Justice Committee. I believe my evidence will be of assistance. I need a short period of time to receive legal advice to be able to produce relevant documents to the committee. Butts featured prominently in Wilson-Raybould's version of events. She recounted a December 5th meeting at the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa.
I wanted to speak about a number of things, including bringing up SNC and the barrage of people hounding me and my staff. He said I needed to find a solution.
Later, on December 18th, Wilson-Raybould's Chief of Staff, Jessica Prince, met with Butts and the Prime Minister's Chief, Katie Telford, a meeting Prince detailed to Wilson-Raybould in text messages.
Gerry said, quote, "Jess, there is no solution here that does not involve some interference," end quote.
The committee is also bringing back Clerk of the Privy Council Michael Wernick. Canada's top civil servant testified previously that he had a key phone call with Wilson-Raybould on December 19th.
So I can tell you with complete assurance that my view of those conversations is that they were within the boundaries of what's lawful and appropriate.
She viewed it quite differently.
I believe that there were 3 occasions in that conversation where there was a veiled threat.
Mr. Wernick's testimony from last Thursday was completely demolished. If Ms. Wilson-Raybould's version of events is true, Mr. Wernick is a liar.
The committee isn't just recalling Wernick, it's asking the Deputy Minister of Justice, Nathalie Drouin, to come back as well. Wilson-Raybould testified that the clerk and her then deputy had a phone call that suggests she lost her job as Justice Minister because of the standoff with the Prime Minister. The call took place 3 days before the cabinet shuffle.
As part of this conversation, the clerk tells the deputy that one of the first conversations that the new minister will be expected to have with the Prime Minister will be on SNC-Lavalin.
All of that will play out in public next week, while in private, the Prime Minister will decide if Wilson-Raybould can stay in the Liberal caucus.
I have taken knowledge of her testimony, and there's still reflections to have on next steps.
David, you've done some digging into those next steps. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Ian, CBC News has learned that the Prime Minister is going to shuffle his cabinet on Friday morning. This is something we knew was going to happen eventually because of that vacancy Jody Wilson-Raybould created when she resigned as Minister of Veterans Affairs. And ever since then, Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan has been doing double duty. Well, what a high-level source tells me tonight is that this is going to be a small shuffle. Only a handful of ministers are moving to fill that vacancy. And if you're a backbencher waiting at home for a phone call tonight about a promotion, I got some bad news. The source tells me no new ministers going into cabinet. This this is only a shuffle of existing ministers that will be rolled out tomorrow. Ian.
Okay, David, thank you.
You're welcome.
One big question in all of this, does the pressure alleged by Wilson Raybould amount to a crime? Here's Katie Simpson with the legal arguments.
The former Attorney General says from her perspective, no one dealing with the SNC-Lavalin affair broke the law. But not everyone agrees with her legal opinion. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is urging police to investigate. In a letter to the RCMP commissioner, he outlined 2 sections of the criminal code he says have been violated: the intent to provoke fear in the Attorney General and the attempt to obstruct or defeat the course of justice. Tonight, 5 former attorneys general echoed that call. 4 Conservatives and 1 NDP wrote their own letter to the commissioner, saying ordinary Canadians who do not benefit from political connections have been charged under these sections with much less evidence.
I do think there's enough there that it's not an outrageous allegation that the RCMP should at least look at it.
This lawyer says based on what he's heard so far from Jody Wilson Raybould, the concerns about obstruction of justice appear most significant.
I think there's enough of a basis for at least an investigation, because what has happened could speak to a conspiratorial intent to obstruct justice, for example.
Making that kind of argument in court would be a difficult task, according to the head of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association.
You need to have evidence that the Prime Minister intended to obstruct justice, and we didn't hear any of that.
Though not criminal, Michael Bryant says there's been inappropriate behavior from both sides of this story.
They should have stopped trying to bend her to their will. At the same time, she needed to be open-minded to the legal arguments and the facts and the evidence, and she clearly wasn't. So it's a pox on both their houses.
To our knowledge, no one has been contacted by the RCMP.
The Prime Minister suggested today a police investigation is not necessary and that the Justice Committee and Ethics Commissioner's probes are good enough. Officials in the RCMP are reviewing Andrew Scheer's letter, but they refuse to confirm or deny whether an investigation is underway. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
So we've heard political and legal interpretations of all of this. What do potential voters think? Here's a sample from some people on the street and on local radio, starting in Jody Wilson Raybould's own riding of Vancouver Granville.
I'm upset. The law should be independent from the politics.
She definitely said no laws were broken. I think we need more clarification from all parties.
Why don't they come right out and say their fight for jobs for people in Quebec and Ontario, and they couldn't give a crap about the rest of the country?
I think it could turn into something a lot bigger. Yeah, and impact the election for sure.
There is a flaw in the system that you can have a partisan attorney general who's not supposed to be partisan, who has a microfolder but has a minister's position of justice, which is a macrofolder, and who's supposed to be pulling for her party.
It's up to the people to judge.
And how Canadians ultimately judge this scandal could depend on a few factors: their own politics, their knowledge of the law, even perhaps where they live. Much has been said about the Prime Minister's relationship to Montreal and SNC-Lavalin. Alison Northcott explores the view from Quebec.
In Justin Trudeau's diverse Montreal riding of Papineau, opinions vary over the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
We're voting for someone to be open books, but it seems like it's not, so I don't think I will be voting for him again.
I will vote for him again.
You will vote for him?
Yes, I'm a huge voter.
My opinion of the Prime Minister has obviously diminished a little bit.
I hear those things and people talking both sides sometimes.
Do you believe one version of events over the other?
From the beginning, some Quebec politicians, pundits, and members of the public have supported giving SNC-Lavalin a deal.
We've had half versions. We've had denials.
But some say Trudeau has simply failed to explain to Canadians why it's so important to save those 9,000 jobs, and that Wilson Raybould's testimony makes things worse.
I think it will hurt him everywhere in Canada, and it will hurt him less probably because there's more sympathy towards SNC-Lavalin, but I think it will hurt him here too.
Quebec's premier says the testimony has raised questions.
I don't know what happened between Mr. Trudeau and the former Minister of Justice. I don't know what kind of pressure he put.
But he says his main concern is keeping the company and its jobs in Quebec. His own justice minister, though, has graver concerns.
It is troubling because I very deeply believe in our institutions. I really deeply believe in the rule of law. And without taking sides, if what was said is true, it's troubling.
She says she will not interfere with decisions made by Quebec's public prosecutors for SNC-Lavalin or any file.
Tout le monde a raison, tout le monde a tort.
Meanwhile, many, like this woman, feel caught in the middle of a complicated story and are waiting for clarity. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
And with such a complicated story, we wanted to know what you were curious about, and you didn't hold back. So we're going to try to get answers to all of those questions.
What does Trudeau have to do to get past this SNC-Lavalin fiasco?
Do you think that this scandal will register with the average voter in the upcoming election?
Why has she not resigned as a member of the Liberal caucus?
Andrew, Chantal, and Paul are going to tackle your questions. We have another special ad issue coming up. But let's go to Toronto now. Adrian, you're looking at a story that the government wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, Ian, safe to say with everything going on this week, the Liberals were very happy to claim a win.
To celebrate this moment, the introduction of Bill C-92, we have finally arrived at this historic day.
Okay, self-congratulations aside, Bill C-92 would completely overhaul Indigenous child welfare, effectively turning it over to Indigenous communities themselves and pledging new funding. The government noted that while only 7% of Canada's children are Indigenous, they represent more than half of the country's children in foster care, something that the bill, backed by First Nations leaders, aims to change. For many Indigenous people, the changes cannot come fast enough, especially those whose lives have been shaped by the old system. But as Olivia Stefanovic tells us, they are wary of what may happen next.
Miigwech. Tessa Quajigan relies on an app to teach her son Cree, an opportunity she didn't have growing up in the child welfare system.
It wasn't taught to me. It should have been. And I wish it was, because now I try to give that to my son without really knowing it myself.
She lost more than her language and a sense of culture. She's trying to regain her faith in others.
It was isolating, and I questioned a lot.
Her experience with child welfare is multi-generational. She almost lost custody of her son as well when he was staying with his dad, who died of an overdose.
I needed to come and fight for him. So when I did, the first initial meetings were awful. There was very, guilt-shaming when I had been in shock myself.
She believes it would have been different if her First Nation had been in control. That's the goal behind the new federal legislation. It seeks to keep children and youth with their families and in their communities.
I'm hoping that this way, this new legislation will help that not happen to anybody else.
Her expectations are high. So too are Miranda Egertson's, a friend who spent years bouncing through the system.
It's a fight to feel secure every day. And
she has many questions about Bill C-92.
It does sound hopeful, but how many times has our people heard stuff like this?
Cautiously, they wait to see changes. But with just 10 weeks left before the House breaks for summer and a looming federal election, politicians have little time to spare to push through this major reform. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
And some advocates also have concerns about how funding will work under this new arrangement. The federal government still has to sort that out with the provinces. Overseas now, and to the big nuclear summit that just fizzled. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un seemingly went to Vietnam to make a deal. They even scheduled in a signing ceremony, and instead, it all fell apart. Now, each side blames the other. But while there's disagreement over the degree of responsibility, as Paul Hunter tells us, sanctions were the sticking point.
Bottom line, as Donald Trump left Vietnam this morning, it was without an agreement. Despite earlier optimism, no deal on denuclearization with North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that.
Barely had Trump given his version when North Korea countered, not true. Its view, North Korea offered to shutter its main nuclear complex if sanctions were to be merely eased. Whatever the truth on why it all fell apart, said Trump,
sometimes you have to walk, and this was just one of those times.
Back in the U.S., where some had worried Trump might give too much in his eagerness for a deal, a thumbs up, even from top Democrat Nancy Pelosi.
I'm glad that the president walked away from that.
But Kim got this much engagement with a U.S. president for all the world to see. He even took a reporter's question before it all broke down. Might he allow an official U.S. office in North Korea?
Well, I think that is something which is welcomeable.
So, did Kim come away a winner anyway, simply because of optics like this?
Those are certainly benefits for him.
Says Obama-era diplomat and Korea's expert Mintaro Oba. Truth is, Kim wanted a deal, and like Trump, he ended up without one.
And while that's not going to be advertised broadly to the North Korean people, I think perhaps it will weaken his position a little with elites in Pyongyang.
The key question, where does this go from here? After all the talk of making history, they didn't. The U.S. said today there could be more meetings, but none are planned. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Here's some of the other stories we're watching tonight. A major announcement about Canada's space strategy. The Prime Minister unveiled it at the Canadian Space Agency's headquarters in Quebec.
Canada is going to the moon.
This country will be part of NASA's new Lunar Gateway project, an outpost that will orbit the moon and allow astronauts to conduct lunar expeditions. Canada will be developing a robotic system to be known as Canadarm3. It will help repair and maintain the outpost. This is the largest initiative for Canada's space program in more than a decade, injecting some $2 billion into the space sector over 24 years. Israel's prime minister dismissed allegations of wrongdoing and vowed to stay in office after the country's attorney general said he will indict Benjamin Netanyahu. The charges include bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. If a court doesn't stop the proceeding, it will mark the first time a sitting Israeli prime minister has been charged with a crime. The country's general election is set for April 9th.
There's not much I can say other than it was very productive. As I said, I'm committed to telling the truth.
And Michael Cohen, U.S. President Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, will get another chance to do that. After a closed-door session today, he'll return next Wednesday to finish testifying in front of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee. It's looking into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election.
Ahead tonight, why is Meghan Markle the target of so much hatred online?
And add issues here to answer your questions about the SNC-Lavalin story.
But first, a CBC Marketplace investigation. What is really in the baby food?
I think it's surprising because not a lot of moms out there, such as myself, knew that rice had arsenic.
They came in their thousands to this shrine of aviation to witness history replayed and in some cases beg it to take with them.
This is hallowed ground and I consider it sacred. I'm an aviation enthusiast.
No shortage of those on this rain-drenched day, among them movie star John Travolta and President Bush.
And on the day they did fly, just like today, the conditions were not ideal. But they went ahead anyway.
There's a Canadian-built jet trainer. Overhead, a Canadian contribution, a fly past by two snowbirds, here to mark the centennial of the Wright brothers' first flight.
It really hit home that hey, we flew 100 years to the day over the exact same site. It still hasn't totally sunk in, I don't think.
I often wonder if Uncle Orr fully understood the gift
the view he and Uncle Will would give the world from these beautiful sandy dunes on December 17th in 1903.
On that date, two brothers from Dayton, Ohio achieved what no one else had: controlled heavier-than-air flight. Today it seems like such a modest achievement. Beginning from the point of that granite marker, the Wrights spent just 12 seconds in the air, a mere 120 feet to land here. And yet, even that short hop truly was, to coin a later phrase, a giant leap for mankind.
Countdown to Kitty Hawk.
A leap this team of aviators hope to replicate with their wood, cloth, and wire reproduction of the Wrights flying machine.
There she goes!
After a 2-hour wait, the rains finally subsided, and the replica flyer trundled down its runway, tantalizingly close to taking off before splashing into a mud puddle. Disappointing the pilot, but not the crowd.
What do you think about that?
That's scary, to be honest with you.
This week, in a joint investigation, Marketplace and Radio Canada take a closer look at what you're feeding your baby.
Our intent as mothers is to provide our babies with good, wholesome foods that are going to help their development and growth.
So the team tested popular infant cereals and snacks and found higher levels of one particular toxin lurking in the mix. And as Magda Gabriselasa tells us, a popular grain might just be the source.
These babies have worked up quite the appetite. As for what they're eating, there's a list of options.
We started with rice cereal because the pediatrician recommended rice cereal. He likes his snacks, so puffs.
Rice cereal first at 5 months.
Turns out there's something else in the mix: arsenic. It's a naturally occurring toxin that's in the water and soil. It can also come from industrial and agricultural runoff. The most toxic kind is called inorganic arsenic. Research shows that rice absorbs more arsenic than other grains, and rice is one of the most popular grains in baby foods. So what does that mean for baby food? Marketplace did several tests of 7 kinds of infant cereal and 7 kinds of snacks. We found rice products had the highest levels of arsenic. Baby Gourmet Creamy Brown Rice Cereal and PC Organic Puffs had the highest in our test. Both are Canadian companies.
I think it's surprising because not a lot of mums out there, such as myself, knew that rice had arsenic.
Research has linked arsenic to an increased risk of cancer over time and might affect a child's neurocognitive development. Taking action, Europe set a legal limit for inorganic arsenic in baby food of 100 parts per billion. Our tests show Baby Gourmet Creamy Brown Rice had an average of 125 parts per billion, and PC Organic Puffs had around 170. Andrew Maharg is one of the world's leading arsenic experts.
I do not recommend giving children food products with such high levels of arsenic in them.
Maharg says these products would be illegal in Europe. However, they're on store shelves across Canada. Here, there are no set limits for arsenic in baby food. Health Canada says it's been looking at arsenic in food and drinks for 10 years, but only now is it looking at setting limits on rice products, including those for children. Testing these 2 products will be part of the process.
If we find that they're consistently high, we do what we call a health risk assessment. We can do a variety of different things, all the way up to taking it off the market if need be, if there's a risk there.
As for the other products we tested, they all fell below the EU limit. We shared our results with both Baby Gourmet and PC Organics. They provided statements. Baby Gourmet said its team is currently reviewing the new information provided to us by CBC Marketplace, as the standards used in some countries around the world differ from the Canadian guidelines we follow. Meanwhile, PC Organics, which is owned by Loblaws, assures its customers that its products are safe, but it's also committing to reducing the arsenic.
We are working with our suppliers to minimize these trace levels and will use European standards as our guide. Magda Gabriselasa, CBC News, Toronto.
So you might now be wondering, what about the rice we all eat? Well, higher levels of arsenic have been found in that too, but there are a couple things you can do to reduce your exposure. Apparently, try rinsing your rice really well and cooking it in a lot of water, kind of like pasta. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says using 10 parts water to 1 part rice can reduce arsenic content by about 60%. Another tip, just switch things up. Add lower arsenic grains into your diet, like quinoa, bulgur, and farro. You can watch the full Marketplace investigation tomorrow night on CBC Television, starting at 8 p.m., 8:30 in Newfoundland.
Straight ahead, you sent us your questions on the SNC-Lavalin controversy. At Issue will answer some of them next.
And a little later, bullying the Duchess of Sussex. We'll look at who's really behind the online vitriol aimed at Meghan Markle.
There's no shortage of negative things that people are saying. There's a lot of just nastiness, name calling, but also this growing sense of conspiracy theory.
Close to 8,000 ballots were cast, and as soon as they began counting, it became obvious how the vote would go.
Yes. Yes.
A yes vote that will change forever the map of Canada. Inuit have agreed to the land claim, so Ottawa has agreed to divide the Northwest Territories. The final vote was 69% in favor. Inuit leaders celebrated.
This land claims will give us a self-determination and to run our own affairs and our lives in the future here in Nunavut area.
Under the agreement, Ottawa has promised to create the new territory of Nunavut by 1999. And the Inuit are virtually guaranteed self-government because they have 85% of the population in the region. The Inuit will also get $1 billion over 14 years and title to 1/6 of the land in Nunavut. But in return, they have surrendered to Ottawa any claim to the rest of the territory. Even before the vote, Johnny and Louis Mike said the price was too high, that the Inuit have sold land that should have belonged to future generations.
I think it's no good for my descendants.
The challenges that face the Inuit remain daunting. Teen suicide, alcoholism, and family violence are way above the national average. So is unemployment. The Inuit say that should change.
With the new government to be, there's going to be a lot more jobs, and you know, if it all goes well, we will be seen on a map.
The Inuit say it will take years to educate people in everything from skilled trades to how to run a government. But they say the land claims settlement will give them money, land, and the political means to finally take control of their own lives. Allison?
Eric, we've seen other smaller examples of self-government across the country, but is this, though, going to be seen as the model for self-government in years ahead?
I don't know that it'll be seen as the model for self-government. It'll certainly be the biggest example of self-government in Canada. What you have up here is public government, so it's not going to be any special political arrangement, but public government as you have in the territories or other provinces, but by the virtue of the fact that the Inuit have 85% of the population, it will be tantamount to self-government.
In this vote today, were there winners and losers?
Well, I think you could say that both Ottawa and the Inuit leadership feel that both sides won. Ottawa now has certainty about who has title to the land up here, and Ottawa, or the Crown, now has title itself to 82% of the Eastern Arctic. The Inuit feel they are winners because they have title to 18% of the Eastern Arctic. They also get $1 billion, but perhaps most importantly, they have the guarantee from Ottawa that it will create Nunavut by 1999. And as we said, by creating that territory, the Inuit would become the majority in that territory. On the losing side, you could say that the 20 to 30% of Inuit who are against the deal feel that too much land was given to Ottawa, that they felt that for future generations of Inuit, they will not be able to pass on all of the land of the Eastern Arctic. And I suppose the other example of people who may be feeling losers right now would be the Dene of northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, and the western Northwest Territories, because in that case, they feel that the boundary line and some of the lands to which the Inuit have been given title is actually their traditional lands, and so they are talking about going to court on that matter.
Just briefly, Eric, what happens next now?
What happens next is that the ball is now thrown into the Court of Ottawa. It will be brought to the House of Commons. Tom Siddon said today he will introduce legislation next year, probably by spring.
there was a sustained effort, an attempt to politically interfere with my discretion.
She approached me in the House of Commons to inform me that my staff was speaking to her staff, which I think is entirely appropriate.
What we need to do is get to the truth, and that's what a public inquiry will do.
He stands accused of political interference in a criminal case.
There is a process, both at the Justice Committee and indeed at the Ethics Commissioner, that will make a determination on what actually happened here.
So, as you heard, various people sticking to their interpretation of what happened there, and the opposition has more questions. So what is next in the SNC-Lavalin controversy, and how do people across the country feel? We'll put some of your questions to the At Issue panel. Chantal Lebert is in Montreal, Andrew Coyne in Toronto, and Paul Wells also in Toronto. So we've had a little more than 24 hours since the testimony yesterday. There have been new developments, but now that we had a little bit of chance to kind of sit back and listen and watch, I want to get a sense of how you feel things are playing out tonight. And Paul, let's begin with you.
Well, last night, I'm told on social media, it was possible to read all kinds of people saying, well, that's it, the Liberal Party's going to fall apart, they're going to fall on Justin Trudeau, it's open warfare. That hasn't happened. The Liberal antibodies in the early going are kicking in the way they normally do. Partisans going to partisan. And in an election year, they will be quick to remind themselves that the alternative to Justin Trudeau is not Chrystia Freeland or some imaginary, even better Liberal leader. It's Andrew Scheer. And they really don't like Andrew Scheer. They figure they have convinced themselves that he's dangerous for the country. So what are they going to do in response? I'm given to understand they're going to now attack Jody Wilson-Raybould's credibility. That is not what I would advise them to do. I expect that it'll be harder than they think it will be, and it will serve up the spectacle of Liberals attacking Liberals that they had so far spent 36 hours avoiding.
Chantal?
I also think that, and I did see the same thing on social media and in emails, the Liberal reflex kicking up. Someone asked, do you think, or don't you think there will be a putsch and they will replace Justin Trudeau? And I see no evidence of that happening. But I still think many Canadians, including a lot of people who voted Liberal in 2015, expect more from the Prime Minister than what they've been seeing so far, snippets here and there as he's doing other things. And his former Principal Secretary today is asked and will be testifying in front of the Justice Committee, and that's all fine. But at the end of the day, to respond to a sitting or a former sitting minister, I think a lot of people want to hear Justin Trudeau and not just saying there's nothing to this and there's a process in place.
Andrew, last night on At Issue and also in your opinion piece, you're very strong on the fact that that you felt Wilson-Raybould's testimony spoke to a real problem, a crisis for the government. Your thoughts tonight?
Well, and I wasn't the only one. I guess that's the point. Is she has clearly moved the needle on this. People who might previously have been more sympathetic to the government's line on this or more skeptical of her complaints, I think if you look at many of the columnists, for example, people moved off that position to finding her very credible. And partly because of her own demeanor, her own dignity, but also because of the documentation that she brought to the table as well. So it is not going to be sufficient. It is clearly not sufficient for the Prime Minister to continue with the line he's taken all the way along this of just basically blanket denials or half denials or non-denial denials that don't actually get at the nub of this. It's obviously way too soon to be talking about the Prime Minister resigning or being a coup within the party, but it's also way too late for them to be coming forward much further than they have and having much more transparency. And as I said before, we need to hear all of the principal players in this, all the main people that were named in Ms. Wilson-Raybould's testimony need to make their own testimony. So it's great to see Jerry Butts coming forward. I think we need to hear from all of them.
Now, Andrew Scheer, the opposition leader, last night said that the Prime Minister should resign. Today, he upped the ante by sending a letter to the RCMP and saying that there ought to be a criminal investigation. Andrew, is that reasonable, or does that go too far, do you think?
It's not unreasonable in itself. It is not entirely clear, to my satisfaction anyway, to the degree I've talked to lawyers and read other lawyers, it's unlikely to rise to the level of obstruction of justice, but it's not entirely clear that it doesn't. So my own view would be that is something that the RCMP can figure out well enough on their own. I don't think they necessarily need advice from the leader of the opposition or anybody else. So that's mostly a stunt on Andrew Scheer's part, as was the demand for the Prime Minister to resign today. I mean, we need to hear from all sides on this. Ms. Wilson-Raybould made a very compelling testimony, but the people that she accused deserve their day in court, their chance to rebut that, but they got to step forward. And the RCMP will do what they're going to do, and we'll just have to see.
Well, I note that neither of the main opposition parties is calling for an election to allow Canadians to pass judgment on everything that is being put to them. They could, and I suspect the only way that there will be closure on this is by Justin Trudeau restoring his moral authority by winning another mandate, or someone else assuming power. I suspect the reason that no one is calling for that, and instead calling for the impossible to obtain prime ministerial resignation, is because neither of the opposition party is game to go in an election between now and the end of April.
So we put the call out yesterday for people to tell us if they have questions, and we got an unusual number of responses. And among those responses, a lot of thoughtful questions. We're going to play some of those now, and let's start with what Kevin White asked.
Given the prospect of SNC-Lavalin being banned from bidding on government contracts and potentially failing or moving overseas, realistically, had any other political party been in power, would they have done things any differently?
So, Paul, the curtain here was raised. We got to hear about interactions between cabinet ministers and senior staff that maybe we don't always hear. And so a lot of people are wondering, maybe this always happens, and the only difference is we're getting to hear about it in this one particular case.
So I spent a large part of the day trying to decide whether it is naive of me to think that it should have been possible, while Justin Trudeau was sending staffers in waves to tell Jody Wilson-Raybould this was about jobs, this was about economic and political reality, that maybe somebody could have told Canadians that. Because the only glimpse that Canadians had that this was coming down the pike was one paragraph on page 202 of last spring's federal budget. And what it said is, we're going to get tougher on corporate wrongdoers, we're going to increase their accountability, not we're going to serve up a last-minute change to the criminal code that SNC-Lavalin has spent millions of dollars begging us to implement. If they were so all-fired realistic about things, they forgot to tell Canadians, and that's the thing that I'm getting angrier about as the days go on.
Chantal, are you getting angry?
I don't do the angry thing. It gets in the way of thinking, I find. But I think any responsible government of any party would have tried to see whether it could mitigate damage to a major employer that is responsible for 9,000 jobs across the country, only half of them in Quebec, for the record. I don't know that they would have proceeded the same way. Paul is quite right, that process was convoluted. But the opposition parties could also have rung alarm bells. It was not totally hidden. And I don't think either the Conservatives or the NDP really wanted to have a fight with the Liberals over SNC-Lavalin. This is a result of circumstances and personalities, more so than the opposition looking for evidence of something happening with SNC-Lavalin that they wanted to fight over.
What I hope will come out of this is that this will reinforce what ought to have been a pretty solid taboo, that you don't go messing with the independence of an Attorney General or with the prosecutorial discretion of independent prosecutors. That's why the Director of Public Prosecutions was put into law, was to be independent. So to the extent anybody is contemplating that, I hope that this episode will stop them from doing so. But look, the premise that this was going to lead to the collapse of SNC, I think SNC-Lavalin should be viewed with a great deal of skepticism. I think this had much more to do with increasing its bargaining position vis-a-vis the prosecutors, had much more to do with where the headquarters was going to be located, these kinds of political questions, and not these kind of apocalyptic scenarios where the whole company goes under.
I want to move on to Jody Wilson-Raybould, because we've got a lot of questions about her strategies, her motives. Here's a question from Alex Thompson.
With all that Jody Wilson-Raybould has gone through up until this point, including her seeming loss of confidence with the PM, why has she not resigned as a member of the Liberal caucus?
Who wants to answer that? Andrew?
Why should she? That's not, you don't have to be a paid-up believer in the Prime Minister's leadership and in the particular conduct of people around him to be a member of the Liberal Party, or she was elected as a Liberal. I would say that's much more to do with what her riding association and what her electors believe than whether or not she's on the same page as the Prime Minister on any given issue.
So, Paul, another version of that question that we saw a lot of from viewers was, if Jody Wilson-Raybould had not been demoted, or her cabinet position hadn't changed, maybe this never would have become public. So should we look at this with any kind of cynicism in terms of her motive?
I don't think you need Jody Wilson-Raybould to be the purest hero in the history of Canadian politics to believe that she asked some serious questions and raised some important information last night. So the question is, why didn't she quit immediately when she felt the pressure? It seems to me that she stayed in the job from the last part of December to the first part of January because she had reason to believe she'd won the argument. They had come at her and come at her and come at her and come at her and said, "You've got to do this," and she said no, and then she went home for Christmas. It wasn't until the first week in January when they told her that she was moving. Why did she not quit during those 15 days? Well, because it was the holidays.
Let's finish with this, maybe 30 seconds from each of you, beginning with you, Paul. What should the Liberals do? What can the Liberals do to repair the damage, especially over the next week or so?
I would advise them against further rounds of infighting. The former AG made allegations about a dozen people. If they did not hold those meetings, if they were not in those rooms, then they should say so. And if they have records that suggest that they spoke in a different tone or with different content, then they're free to contest that. But it sounds like she's got them dead to rights. And I would encourage this government and this Prime Minister to look inside. Why were you so disingenuous for so long about what was plainly such a major issue for you and everybody working for you? Why can't you tell Canadians what you're doing in there?
Andrew?
I agree that the only thing that's going to save them, if it's going to save them, is transparency. There's no percentages anymore in the stonewalling strategy. That hasn't worked for them. It's not going to work for them. I think there's going to be some officials in that government who should be polishing up their resumes. Whether that's going to include the Prime Minister will be a political decision for the party. Probably not. But I think there may be some other people who are going to be departing.
And Chantal, last word to you.
I expect that we're going to hear a repeat of the clerk's initial testimony. I was struck today by the fact that in the House, no one questioned the bare facts. Everyone is trying to set their sights on interpretation. So I'm not so sure that you can mount a very strong defense that goes beyond, do you believe her or do you find the Prime Minister more credible? But I do think they need to put the Prime Minister in a setting, maybe not the committee, where he does answer more fully the questions that are being put to him, and in a way that shows something beyond code words.
It's been another incredible week and a story that keeps on surprising us. Thanks to all of you. And before we go, be sure to subscribe to the At Issue podcast for extra content. This week, we're talking about those federal by-elections. Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, and on our website, cbcnews.ca/The National.
Up next on The National, why is Meghan Markle the target of online trolls? We'll look at the efforts to counteract all that hate.
Think, would you say that in public? And if you wouldn't say it in public, don't write it, hiding behind your computer screen.
Foreign parliamentary delegations investigating human rights have become routine visitors to China in recent months. The Canadians were the first to be summarily thrown out of the country.
The expulsion of 3 Canadian MPs from China. That's the topic of our big story this week. The 3 parliamentarians say they told their hosts they wanted to check into the human rights situation. But when they met with the relatives of some dissidents, the Chinese government threw them out of the country. In a moment, we'll be talking with our correspondent in Beijing. But first, a look back at this week's events.
We're thrown into the bus.
On Tuesday, the 3 MPs arrived in Hong Kong saying they had been kidnapped and manhandled by the Chinese authorities before they were thrown out of the country. Progressive Conservative Jeff Scott, New Democrat Sven Robinson, and Liberal Beryl Gaffney said they had made it clear to the Chinese government why they wanted to visit.
Very clearly.
But a Chinese spokesman said Thursday the Canadians had abused Chinese hospitality and had engaged in some activities incompatible with their status.
It was quite natural to ask them to leave.
The MP's trip was sponsored by the Vancouver Society in support of the democratic movement in China. According to its leader, it wanted the MPs to test the openness of China. The MPs did that by visiting the relatives of political dissidents who had been connected to the massacre in Tiananmen Square in 1989. The Canadian government has protested the incident, which at one point involved Canadian diplomat Andrew Halper, who was briefly detained along with the MPs. Patrick Brown is the CBC's Beijing correspondent, and he's been following the human rights issue. And Patrick, has this kind of thing ever happened to other foreign visitors to China?
Certainly not to parliamentary delegations. Since Tiananmen Square, we've had 4 or 5 parliamentary delegations from other countries who've come here and with much the same kind of program in mind. They've asked to meet political prisoners. They've met the families of people who are in prison. But they've done it rather more discreetly than the 3 Canadian MPs. And the only similar sort of incident was an American congressional delegation which did go down to Tiananmen Square to lay a wreath, and they were sort of bundled off the square by security police, but they weren't expelled, so this is something of a first.
Why that stronger Chinese reaction for the Canadian MPs?
I'm not sure. It's a bit of a mystery to me what it is they had done that others had not done, except for being a little more direct about their plans than the Chinese care for. It may be that the Chinese government is getting tired of having people come here and wag their fingers at them about human rights. The Chinese view of human rights is very different from our own. They tend to say that the basic human right is to food, shelter, clothing, and they very often criticize Western societies for the large number of homeless. They say, look at these people, they don't even have the simple human right of somewhere to live. And also there's the question of manners, I suppose, that the Chinese do not and have not for thousands of years really liked that kind of direct critical approach that the Canadian MPs adopted. And even some newspapers in Hong Kong are criticizing the Canadian MPs for having been so outspoken about their plans. There's been an editorial in the Hong Kong Standard complaining that the MPs were overblowing what happened to them. They quoted Sven Robertson as saying that he'd had a one-way trip into hell, rather sarcastically. And they also said that this is giving the Chinese a pretext to refuse other human rights delegations that may come in rather more quietly, and that it isn't the right thing to do, according to the Hong Kong Standard and other people.
Whether it's Will and Kate tending bar in Belfast or Harry and Meghan trying local cuisine in Morocco, as usual, the young royals drew crowds of fans this week, their personal appeal among the family's greatest assets. In fact, a recent poll found Prince Harry is now the most popular royal of all time, eclipsing even the Queen. But while his wife scored highly too, Meghan Markle has also become a magnet for abuse. Our Kayla Hounsell examines a growing campaign of hate and what's being done to fight it.
Meghan! Meghan! Meghan!
Since marrying into the royal family, Meghan Markle has become one of the most watched women in the world, her every move under scrutiny. But now, at least online, the attention has turned from a general interest in the new royal to unpleasant, distasteful, and racist comments. Is it my imagination, or does Meghan Markle all of a sudden look like she's trying to be blacker, tweets one person. Posts show Markle carrying bananas on her head and pit the Duchess of Sussex and the Duchess of Cambridge against one another. And the online hatred toward the Duchess of Sussex is growing in both volume and viciousness.
So help us understand what we're looking at here.
Okay, so this is our video screens. They help us to visualize the data that we have.
Gemma Joyce is a social data journalist. She noticed so much nastiness about Meghan Markle online that she decided to dig deep into the vitriol to see who's saying what.
I mean, there's no shortage of negative things that people are saying. There's a lot of just nastiness.
The most popular hashtag around the conversation is Megxit, a play on Brexit. People want Meghan Markle to leave, the way Britain is leaving the European Union. This graph shows how that conversation has grown since the beginning of the year. Then there's hashtag Moonbump, which targets Meghan's baby bump.
Theory going around that she is faking her pregnancy, which to me sounds a little bit mad, but there's all kinds of proof that people are sharing online, all these pictures circling folds in her clothing and stuff like that.
The Duchess and Prince Harry are expecting their first child this spring. The data shows 80% of the negativity toward Meghan is coming from women, and the majority are not from the UK.
And as you can see, the US is a huge driver of that conversation. The UK is just after that, and I think at number 3 is Canada.
Hello magazine, which covers the royals heavily, also noticed the cruelty on its own social channels.
Indeed, it's a very sorry state of affairs.
And when Kensington Palace revealed it is spending hours every week trying to delete the posts, Hello launched Hello to Kindness.
Would you say that in public? And if you wouldn't say it in public, don't write it, hiding behind your computer screen. We're a family magazine and want people just to be nice to each other.
The campaign has drawn support from some big names, including Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York. In an open letter, she wrote that people also tried to portray her and the late Princess Diana as rivals, although they never really felt that way. The hate being spewed online is one thing, but there has also been criticism of Meghan Markle's treatment by the British press.
Meghan is black and she's been divorced and she's an independent woman, and I think people find that threatening. We've seen how it ends, you know, what happened to Diana.
Give them some peace. She's expecting a baby.
Indeed, there has been a lot of coverage, ranging from stories about the Duchess being difficult to work for, to the feud between Meghan and her dad, and her pricey baby shower with friends in New York City. It prompted her best friends to open up to People magazine, albeit anonymously, defending her as a wonderful person. George Clooney also came to her defense, saying the Duchess is being pursued and vilified the way Diana was.
I don't think it's been overtly negative. I don't think it's been disproportionate.
This royal correspondent says times have changed and the comparison to Diana is unfair. She points out the royals are subsidized by taxpayers and play an official role.
Largely, I think Fleet Street sees itself as a critical friend of the royals. If they do great things, let's celebrate them. If they make mistakes, let's highlight them.
But Hello has taken a different stand. The magazine is unapologetically refusing to report any negative stories about the Markle family.
We heard that it was upsetting to the Duchess of Sussex. We took an editorial judgment, as we are allowed to do, not to report any of it, and we sort of stand by this decision.
Gemma Joyce points out that while there is a lot of online abuse, there are Meghan supporters. They have a hashtag too. They're the Megulators.
A lot of people are really supportive of Meghan, so it's not that the trolls are really winning. But at the same time, just looking at the kind of hatred around it is quite depressing, really.
And while there are efforts to stop and delete hurtful posts, they're no match for the ease and rapid speed of social media. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, London.
Next on The National, 13 years, 5 letters, 2 girls, and 1 fantastic coincidence. We'll tell you about an unlikely reunion in our moment.
Right away, I just had that urge to ask her. I was like, I feel like I know you, and where are you from? Like, all these thoughts were racing through my mind.
It took Philip Sprung 10 years of research to develop his super greenhouse. No one knows the details, but the secret is in the covering, a special fabric said to enhance growth. Sprung claims he has a secret process that grows a cucumber from flower to this size in just 6 days.
Well, we had patent attorneys here, and they said that this was a dream of a lifetime. We have 14 patents in the works right now, and we have another 6, I believe it is, already approved.
Sprung built the first greenhouse in Calgary, but it failed. It was built on the site of an old oil refinery, and Sprung claimed gas fumes were killing his plants. He needed an investor to help relocate the business. He found Premier Peckford of Newfoundland.
When I saw it and saw the thing actually growing, and a cucumber in 6 days, you know, what could you say? I mean, here is the evidence, Exhibit A, and then I said, holy smoke, let's Newfoundland be first in something.
You have the most astute business people in government here than any other government in the world that I've seen. And they put together a very tough deal.
They signed the deal a year ago last May. Newfoundland would invest $11 million of the $18 million price tag. 150 new jobs would be created, and Newfoundlanders would be overwhelmed by fresh produce.
It'll not only reduce the amount of imports that we're having into the province, but it will also be at a price which is far more attractive to the consumer.
But Sprung's problems weren't over yet. Construction took longer than expected. Then they had to go back to the government in February for a $2 million loan guarantee to keep going. By that time, Sprung Enviroponics was turning out its first cucumbers.
We want to give to Mr. Toms of NTV, to Mr. Jones of CBC.
But 3 months later, there was another hitch. By May, produce was flooding the market from a lot of other sources. To compete, Sprung had to sell his cucumbers for 55 cents wholesale, when it cost him $1.10 to produce them. Even selling them at half the price it cost him to grow them, Sprung couldn't get rid of all the cucumbers. You see, according to one market survey, the average Newfoundlander eats only half a cucumber a year, and attempts to export them at a profit have failed. That's why surplus cucumbers have ended up in places like this. Recently, the Newfoundland government guaranteed another $2.6 million loan to keep the company afloat.
It is a critical situation.
I know in my own heart and soul that what we have here is going to work, so it's only a matter of time, and there'll be cucumber over all kinds of people's faces.
Horses are what makes us warriors today.
13 years ago, two little girls bonded over a shared love of sport and science. They were pen pals, one in Ontario, the other in Belize. Eventually, though, they grew up and grew apart. That is until the oddest of coincidences. They both ended up on the same small university campus in Newfoundland in the same class with the same master's advisor. The story of their reunion and their friendship is tonight's moment.
I went up to her and I said, "Are you from Belize?" I went home and I found my letters and I brought them into her.
Oh, I was completely shocked, especially when she brought me the letters that I wrote.
I still have my letters from Melissa.
It just brought back the memories very vividly. I remember sitting down in the class actually coloring and drawing out those pictures.
I was in Mississauga when I wrote these letters and she was in Belize and we both ended up in Newfoundland. Like, what are the chances of that? We see each other pretty much every other day. We hang out with the same people. We're talking about the same sorts of science.
Yeah, we're in the same classes. And I mean, like, it's really easy to build a friendship with Heather. She's such a sweet person.
You have to believe in fate or something.
I definitely believe it was fate.
13 years later, we're the closest we've ever been.
Okay, I am so in love with this story. I know we've been talking about it for a while. All week we've had stories that could be movies of the week. So script writers out there, start writing this one. And I know that you and I don't entirely agree on this part of it. I happen to believe sometimes things are meant to be. You know, Heather had an instinct that she recognized that name. She saw, she asked about it, it came to be. And I don't know, sometimes I think there's a reason for it.
I love the fact that you and I have so much in common, you know, the overlapping traits, but there are a few very distinct differences. And I love that you embrace the romance of fate, but to me, unfortunately, I'm stuck with the world of chance. I think it was just against all odds, just a random chance. But it's still a beautiful story with a beautiful end.
And I love you anyway.
Okay, me too, you. That is The National for February 28th. Good night.
Good night.